Everyone knows the definition of insanity. But how many of your salespeople are doing the same things over and over and over again without making any adjustments and still not getting any different results either? Well, let's talk about how making adjustments might be the ultimate coaching tool. This is Sales Untraining, a very different kind of sales podcast. 3 out of 4 salespeople are failing. They're falling short of their revenue. Why doesn't sales training work? That's what this sales podcast is about. It's your weekly sales strategy guide designed to rewire your sales brain. Welcome to Sales Untraining. I'm Kelly Riggs. Great to have you along. Hey, take a moment. Would you please like, subscribe, follow the podcast? Love to have you as a part of the regular conversation about how we can change sales training to create more consistency and predictability in producing great salespeople. Know anybody in the sales games, a sales leader, someone who might want to be a part of the conversation? I hope you'll forward a link to this episode and to the podcast so that they'll join as well. Well, this week, we're going to talk about coaching, but we're going to talk about some nuance around this idea of coaching. I mean, after all, there is a difference, at least in my mind, between training and coaching. Again, I have an athletic background, and I see those things differently. I see training is introducing new ideas, new concepts, new skills. And once you've been exposed to those things and taught perhaps how to do them, you still haven't mastered those ideas, those skills, those concepts. And so you practice over and over. And in that practice session, you have a coach working with you. Observation is involved. They're changing small things that you're doing. They're giving you insights that you don't have. They're seeing things you don't see. Training is like what you do before the game, and coaching is like what you do either during or after the game to improve. So when we're refining skills, I think we're coaching, my definition. When we're teaching new skills, we're doing training. Well, when you talk about coaching, it's one of those words that we use like leadership. You know, what is leadership exactly? Ask 10 people, you get 10 answers. What is coaching? Ask 10 people, you'll get 10 examples, 10 answers, 10 different ideas. Oh, sure, in both instances, there'll be overlap. But it's interesting that there's not this clearly understood definition of exactly what we're talking about. Well, in my mind, the most valuable thing that coaches do is observation during sales calls, because it is there that we see what actually transpires in front of a prospect or a customer, giving me the opportunity to suggest small adjustments that can be made to help an individual salesperson perform at a higher level. I mean, all of us. I mean, even those of us who teach selling for a living, who do this and are immersed in it day after day, we're not perfect. And we certainly, like great athletes, can create a bad habit or get off down the wrong track and do some things that, if we were paying attention, we wouldn't do. But it happens incrementally, just a little bit at a time, and suddenly we find ourselves lost. And we need a coach to help us back our way back out into the mainstream and do the things that we already know how to do, but we're not doing them. Wearing the OU shirt today. I'm from Oklahoma. I'm an Oklahoma Sooners fan. Many of you watching or listening probably root for completely different teams, but not too very long ago, Oklahoma played Missouri. Now, Missouri comes into the game with a highly touted running game. I mean, they are very, very, very good in the running game. Number 8 nationally overall. They've got a running back that's number 2 nationally overall. He's rushing for 127 yards a game, 1,400 yards on the year. And they're just known for an offense that's going to test you at the line of scrimmage. They're going to pound it out. They're going to wear you down. They're going to run the clock. And they're going to do a very good job of controlling the game and controlling the football. And their record in the SEC reflects that. A very good team, ranked team. So we go to the game, we're watching the game, and they come out in the first series They get the ball first, and they're just marching down the field. They peel off runs of 5 and 2 and 8 and 5 and 7 and 4 and 3 and 8. And we're just like, they're just chewing up yardage. They're dominating the line of scrimmage. They're moving OU's linemen off the ball. They're creating openings for running lanes. And we're getting very nervous. Now, yeah, of course, it's the first series, but the big question in everyone's mind is, how will Brent Venables, both head coach and defensive coordinator, how will he adjust? I've always said for years now that great coaches make their money at halftime, but sometimes you can't wait till halftime, or you don't need to, in order to make the adjustments that will enable you to play at a much higher level and affect the end result right now. Well, Venables responded, as did the OU defense, because from the first quarter on, where they gave up 45 yards rushing first quarter alone, that's 180 yards pace, which would have been a little below their average, but still substantial, to after that, they gave up almost nothing. After that, they had an entire 6 yards of rushing in the next 3 quarters. 6 yards. Just a substantial turnaround from the first drive. And it just got me thinking how much better salespeople can be when sales leaders are on site, in calls, observing what's going on. Now, typically, sales leaders, sales managers, what they'll typically do is when they're involved in the call, they want to run the call. They want to dominate the call. They bring all the expertise, the background, the history, the technical knowledge, the product knowledge. So they're in there to make a splash. They're in there to, bring some importance to the call because, I'm the expert from afar and I'm out here going to make this thing happen. And so typically they'll rescue their salespeople. They'll make the sale and they walk out feeling really good, patting themselves on the back about how well they did. They help that salesperson close that deal and moving on. Next person. Except that's not what coaches do. In the real world, in sports, coaches don't play. They just coach. They don't go out on the field and say, hang on a second, let me take a few snaps and kind of give you an idea of what's going on. Now, they might do some of that in practice in terms of actually getting on the field and walking through plays and those kinds of things, but not during the game. And the very best sales leaders that I've seen are adept. In fact, they are highly skilled at observation during sales calls and finding things that can be adjusted very quickly to improve the performance of the salesperson. That's where sales leaders make their money. But see, the challenge is we've got to deal with egos and we've got to deal with all different levels of capabilities in salespeople. And there's just this overwhelming urge, this need to become a central part of the sales call. When I was a young sales guy, I had one extraordinary sales leader that worked with me, and we would actually game plan how the call is going to go before we walked in the call. How do you want to play this? Do you want to lead? Do you want me to lead? Or I want you to take this call. Let's talk about your strategy. What's your primary objective? What are the questions you're going to ask? How do you feel like the call could go? What kinds of objections might you encounter? How will you respond? And each of those coaching sessions ingrained in me, without being told, here's what you do, ingrained in me a process for how you prepare for sales calls. This is what coaches do. They don't just direct. They don't just tell people what to do. They walk them through. They question. They use that method, a Socratic methodology of asking questions to engage the brain, to cause people to think and consider how they might go through the call, respond in the call, so forth. Then, after the call, we'd go out on the sidewalk. He called it curbside coaching. Before we got in the car, he would start the coaching process. He would say, so, really good call. Tell me what you think went well. What were some of the things that you did well? Now, that made me a little nervous and uncomfortable. So many times I wouldn't have a lot to say. And he'd go, now hang on a second. You did this really well. This was excellent. You got his attention this way. This was a great opening question. I mean, after all, he's been training me and coaching me on the fly. So he's saying there's some things that you did well. What kinds of things might we improve on? And of course, at that point, being hyper self-critical, I could come up with a dozen things, but he's slow down, hang on. Let me ask you a couple of questions. Did you notice when he said this? No. Okay. Why do you think you missed that? Or did you see the way he reacted? Did you see his features when he said this or you asked this question? No. Okay, well, let's talk about why. And he slowly began to condition me to know the things that I was going to talk about in the call so that I could relax my mind and focus on listening, asking deeper questions, and focusing on what the prospect was not only saying, but how they were saying it. And slowly over time, I got better and better at this. That's exactly what coaches do. So I want to give you four adjustments that I think coaches need to be looking for in calls, the kind of adjustments that a great coach can help a salesperson make to begin to improve their performance very, very quickly. Well, the first one of those that I want to look at is the proactive communication that I think needs to be considered in a call. Now, what do I mean by that? I mean, I see it quite often that salespeople will encounter the same scenarios over and over. They'll hear the same objections again and again. They know for a fact that a price objection, for example, is coming somewhere down the road. But yet, coaches won't say, all right, how do we deal with that proactively? Instead of being on defense and waiting for them to bring this thing out, how do we deal with it proactively? How can we go on offense, as it were? So, for example, if I'm talking about pricing, and if we tend to be the highest price or among the highest priced products or services in our industry, and there are very good reasons for that, I might coach a salesperson to say, quite often people make comments about our pricing. When they hear what our pricing is, they tend to stand back and go, well, that's a little higher than what I'm used to. And I want to suggest that may be the case with you, but I want to tell you why that is and the things that we believe create such differentiated value for you as a client. Now, that's an off-the-cuff run at it, but there are ways, if you know that you're seeing the same scenarios, the same objections, the same kinds of responses over and over with a particular salesperson, a good coach notices those things and coaches the salesperson on how to avoid it, how to lead into it, how to go on offense, how to do things differently instead of finding themselves in the same scenario over and over and over again and never making adjustments and expecting that something will change, because it won't. Now, here's why this is critical, because as salespeople get confident in the way that they proactively deal with things, or they see how subtle adjustments cause those scenarios not to pop up, they gain enormous confidence. And so they feel the impact of the coaching. Sales leaders, that improves your credibility with your salespeople when the small adjustments that you make help them become more effective almost immediately in sales calls. And this is one of those things that I encounter all the time. People will say, well, we keep hearing over and over X. I go, then why don't you deal with it? What do you mean? Why don't you make it a part of the conversation early on? Take the legs out of that objection by explaining that you hear that and here's why it's a part of the landscape and why it's important for them to understand the backstory. And then people will often go, well, yeah, that makes sense. Okay. Whether they agree or disagree, what I'm not doing, and this is where it gets really critically important, is I'm not defending. When people offer criticism or objection, or you find yourself in very common scenarios and it's pointed out, or they object or argue against a particular point, we give off very negative vibes when we go on defense. Well, that's not entirely the case. Well, listen, it's true. We can, our prices are somewhat higher on occasion. Or, I mean, the whole mood changes. It's almost like guilty. I'm just trying to figure out a way to get out of this thing. But that happens because we're taken by surprise. We're not proactive. And, we feel like we have to defend. And that's not at all what I will do. Many times, what I want to do is lean into certain things, lean into the idea that, yeah, we're more expensive. I mean, you hear that a lot, but people won't even justify it. They'll say, well, we tend to be a higher price product or service, but, our quality demands that, or we have great service, or they'll make these generic claims that really don't move the needle. That's why you really have to think out these things, how you respond or how you proactively address it. And it needs to be done with confidence and positivity, and it needs to be compelling. It can't be just generic ideas, because then you sound just like every other salesperson who makes those generic claims. Great product, great quality, great service, been around a long time, great brand, great history, huge portfolio of logos that we deal with. I mean, yes, I know you're a salesperson. You sound like everybody else. That's one area. Second area, I think that's really important, that when you're observing as a sales leader and you hear a statement that is made in answer to the salesperson's question, and you notice that the salesperson takes that first answer at surface level, they just go, okay, yes, that makes sense, got it, whatever. They don't explore that first answer at all. I've done 2 or 3 podcasts on this in the past, where it's the tactical curiosity that really gets down to the level of information that most salespeople never get. It creates the kind of conversation that leads to deeper ideas and thoughts and concepts, instead of asking a question, getting an answer. Ask the next question, get an answer. Ask the third question, get an answer. Instead, for those salespeople who are really tuned in, what they hear is, okay, I hear a surface level answer. What's below that? Tell me more about that. Hey, how did you get to that point? Why did your team make that decision? What kind of impact did it have on operations? There's a lot below the first answer. It's like, asking your kids, how was school today? Fine. Okay, great. What are you doing this afternoon? Going to practice? Okay, fantastic. That's it? That's all you have? There's no depth, there's no understanding, there's no real communication, and I think that's one of the things that you really have to look at. The third area of observation, and I've labeled this a number of times as the single biggest mistake that salespeople make, but sales leaders, this is why you're in the call. You have to observe these things. And it's when your salesperson gets a clue that there's an opportunity, and they immediately turn on the sales switch and they start selling. The prospect, for example, says, we've been looking at some ideas around modernizing this particular production line. Really fantastic. Well, listen, I'm glad I came today, because this is one of our newer products, and I want to tell you a little bit about it. And here we go. Or the questions they ask are just superficial. Well, what kind of project line would you be looking for? And what size would that be? And what would you be doing with that? And so we go, now hang on, Kelly, I'm asking questions. You're not actually asking questions per se. You're interrogating, and you're asking questions that give you information so that you can sell. That's not my objective. My objective is to ask the questions that create dialogue. It's a back and forth. If the answers are factually based, or specifications, product knowledge, those kinds of things coming from your prospect, times, dates, those kinds of things, we're not getting into a conversation where they're actually relating their ideas, their concepts, their mindset, their opinions, in order to have some depth of information I can use in a future presentation when I've earned the right to make a presentation. Hey, coming up next, number 4, the thing that sales leaders should be looking for. This one's a little more obvious, but maybe a little less addressed. Stay with me. Hey, thanks for making Sales Untraining your first listen of the week. And if you find something you like, if you hear something that's interesting, I hope you'll share it with somebody you know. You can find out more about me at bizlockerroom.com or email me, kelly@bizlockerroom.com. Now back to the show.
The listening part.
Creating a need means you're going to talk to them about something they're not aware of. They don't even know there's a gap in performance because they don't know that there's an upside, that there's an innovation, a change, a new product, something that gives them way more than they're getting now. So they either have already got to understand and perceive, listen, we got a challenge. We've got a gap in performance. We've got a need that we need to address. There's a problem we need to solve.
And you
or in your initial calls and your discovery dialogue, they've got to become aware of something that causes them to go, oh, really? Wow. Their brain says, hang on a second. There's something here that could benefit you. And suddenly, yes, they have a need. Welcome back. It's Sales Untraining. So we're talking about coaching and we're talking about making adjustments. This is the in-game stuff. This is during calls when you can observe what is actually happening with a real client. You can come out of that call and you can have real conversations about changes and adjustments and some little things that you observe, things that can be done differently. And there's a whole lot behind this idea that can be explored. But the reality is that sales leaders are responsible for training their people, understanding their strengths, and addressing their weaknesses. But I'm not talking in that scenario about the nuance. I'm talking about sales process and sales presentations and planning and all of the things that go into creating the environment that salespeople work inside of that allows them to be successful. But that's like prep for the game. That's like we've got a game plan. We know what plays we want to run. We know how we're going to attack the other team. We know what our strategy is. So we got a plan. We've got a strategy. We've trained around those ideas. We've practiced. Now let's go play the game. All right. Now we're in the game, the sales call. The objective is to observe and to provide coaching on improvement. Now, I'm not looking for things to criticize. There's a huge difference between criticism and coaching. And typically it's the relationship that you have with the salesperson. I mean, it's amazing. I can say the same thing to two different salespeople, and one will say, man, I love when that guy talks to me. He gives me insights. He helps me get better. I mean, I improve every time we go on a call together. Say the exact same thing to another guy. He's like, man, every time we have a call, a guy criticizes me. That's all he does. Critical. That's it. What's the difference? It's the relationship. It's the trust that's been developed. And this is why it is impossible to be effective as a sales leader if your people don't trust you, because you're in the change business. You're in the business of helping salespeople make changes that improve their performance on a day-to-day basis. And that's why it's so much like sports. Listen, if you're not into sports, I'm not trying to push sports down your throat. It's just such a phenomenal example of how sales leaders can be more effective in their roles. So number 4, the other thing that I think sales leaders can really help salespeople make adjustments has to do with emotional intelligence. It kind of relates to my earlier comments about being defensive. If I'm in a call and I notice that someone's demeanor changes and they feel defensive, or they're starting to defend their position, their product, their company, themselves, selling in general, whatever it is, they take on a whole different persona when they become defensive, then that's something I'm going to come out and talk about, because we know from a psychology standpoint that the customer, the prospect, reads that in me, and their perception of that defensiveness is often, I'm right, you have something to hide, this is something you don't do well. And so psychology plays an enormous role in influence. Selling is psychology, because selling is the process of influencing someone to make a decision to purchase from me in the presence of extreme competition. It's the game of influence. So psychology plays a significant role. Emotional intelligence is the manifestation of a lot of that psychology. People can't regulate their emotions because they haven't prepared themselves. For example, if a prospect was upset because we failed to deliver on time, we put them in a bad spot, and they get angry and jump down my throat. If I'm not prepared for that and I respond in kind, I can effectively kill any further operations, sales calls, whatever, in the future. I can shut it all down right there. But if I have the ability to game plan that going in, knowing these are the potential things that might happen, and I need to prepare myself for that and understand that they have a good reason. They may not have emotional intelligence either, so they might get angry or jump down my throat. They might use it as a negotiation lever. They might be trying to manipulate me in some way. Then I can go, hey, this is part of being in the game. How do I adjust? How do I improve what I'm doing to improve the level of credibility that I have? All of these things, understanding, reading people and how they respond and their facial features and tonality. I can't tell you how many times I came out of a sales call with the sales leader I was talking about earlier, and he would say things like, "Did you notice how he said that?" Nope, no idea. I'm like, I think, yeah, he seemed to be a little upset. You're right. He did seem to be a little upset, but you didn't mention it. You didn't respond to it. You didn't adjust to it. What might you have done differently? And eventually I learned how to say, Mr. Prospect, it seems to me that this has really upset you in some ways, and that we've really stepped off on the wrong path. Tell me about that. What are you feeling right now? Something like that. Now, that makes a lot of people uncomfortable and nervous. Well, that's not part of what I do. It's not of course it is. Again, selling, interpersonal relationships, it's about influence and psychology. When you address things, then they don't hide behind the curtain for the rest of the sales process. How many times do we have hidden conflict? We know it exists. We know they're irritated, upset, whatever, and we don't just say, hey, let's just get this out on the table. And the things that we've done that have caused these kind of problems, we need to know how you feel. We need to know how to address them, because we're going to make it right. A lot better than going back and saying, boy, they're really irritated, man. This is going to be tough to get over. Well, how are you going to get over it if it never got addressed? Sales leaders, coaching is where you make your money. I'll see you next time.
Sales Untraining is a production of Business Locker Room and Pod About It Productions. Music and editing by Doug Branson. To get more Kelly, visit bizlockerroom.com.